Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard.
Always a pleasure to be on.
Hilliard, the changing face of retail across North America and probably the entire planet, anywhere where they're locked down. We've seen some major retailers in Canada, Army and Navy, Reitman's just announcing they're not going to be reopening their doors. What kind of an impact is this going to have on commercial real estate?
Well, it has to be big. You know, in Edmonton, we just had Hudson's Bay downtown store. Now, I think there's 3 stores in Edmonton, so they'll still have 2, I guess, left, but the downtown store is closing. It's a huge chunk of space, and the thing about those anchor tenants, as they call them, is that they pay very low rent. So from the point of view of the owner of the mall, they don't miss it that much in terms of dollars. But the smaller stores, the ones that pay the really high rent, they'll leave right away if the anchor's gone, because the anchor is the one that draws people in. So it's a disaster, basically. And, you know, it's never coming back, because people really don't need to go and see things in person as much as they used to. They're getting more and more used to doing it online. And the whole industry was completely overbuilt for probably 15 years now. And it's this COVID-19 situation is causing a whole bunch of things that were probably going to play out over 10 years to play out over 10 weeks or 10 months at the very most.
What's going to happen to places like the world's biggest shopping mall, West Edmonton?
Well, yeah, I mean, the West Edmonton stores seem to be the ones that are surviving in Edmonton. The group that developed 555, it's called, they're still developing some new malls in the U.S. I don't think they've done much in Canada lately, but it's a destination. It's a little bit different in that it's a destination that you can go to for the whole day, and there's each population area in northern Canada that in the past have come to Edmonton for entertainment as well as shopping. So it's got a bunch of attractions like that. So it might be the one that survives. I don't know, but just a regular mall where people drive up with their car and go and get something. It's just that people are learning rapidly. It's so much easier just to push a button on the computer and it shows up in a day or two. So.
With that happening, do they have to repurpose malls, turn them into senior citizens housing? Because so many malls do have medical facilities or doctor's offices attached.
Yeah, that's exactly the one that's the only one that I've seen that really works. I mean, and I'm not even sure if it works, but it's the one that seems to be the most robust model, where they take the anchor store out and they put it in a bunch of medical facilities for older people. But you know, there's just too many malls, and the announcement. There's one of the biggest owners is RioCan in Canada, and Brookfield owns a bunch of space and office towers and that sort of thing. And Brookfield made a mistake, and I think could be an existential mistake. I don't know. We'll see. Buying a chain of shopping centers in the U.S. just in the last year and a half for many, many billions of dollars. I forget the exact amount, but so they just announced that they're going to offer $5 billion in loans to retail stores to stay alive, and that doesn't sound like a great model for a landlord. They're supposed to be collecting rent from the tenants, not giving money to the tenants. So it's and the thing is, the U.S. Edmonton's probably the most overbuilt market in Canada, but the whole of the U.S. is overbuilt to a degree that is hard to imagine. I went to a conference in New York put on by one of the Swiss investment banks about 10 or 12 years ago, And the analyst that was presenting about shopping centers and retail said it's way overbuilt. And a couple of years later, I went back to the same, and it was during when the global financial crisis hit, in between. And I went back and I asked him, I said, well, what, a couple of years ago you said it was way overbuilt. He said, you won't believe it, they kept building. And even though it was way overbuilt 2 years ago, now they continued to build even more and more space. And so I asked him what the outcome is. He said bankruptcy. That's the only way. It's the only way you get out of this is to shut down the space through bankruptcy. But even bankruptcy doesn't solve the problem, because then the mall still exists, the buildings are still there. And I haven't seen, to answer your question, I haven't really seen a viable model to take it over. There have been, the Canadian one, RioCan, is trying to do, putting residential in some of the malls in Ontario. So canceling some of the space that was formerly occupied by Zellers or something like that, and putting some apartments in there. So that might work.
That's what's happening with Brentwood in Burnaby, a suburb of Vancouver. Yeah. Same thing, where there used to be small shops and so on. Those are now towers for people.
But, the residential's, the whole thesis of my book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash, is residential's also already overbuilt, right? So it doesn't seem like a solution to build more of something that's overbuilt already. The only thing is, and this might work, is residential is way overbuilt in Canada, but they kind of built the wrong kind of stuff. They built luxury condos, and we could talk about that. And now the investors are a huge percentage of the investors, maybe as many as half of them, are losing $1,000 a month or more by trying to rent out these condos, and they can't get enough rent to pay all their expenses. But they didn't build enough of the affordable rentals. And that's even the latest program where several buildings have been built in Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, and probably Toronto too, for purpose-built rental, as they call it. Even those they've been building the type of accommodation that's just too expensive. So for a long time, really since the government backed out of the sector in the mid-'70s, there hasn't been a lot of affordable rental space constructed. So that could very well be the thing that might work, would be to put some affordable housing attached to where those shopping centers are, because there's a tremendous amount of land available. It's going to be cheap to get a lease on it or to buy it.
Well, again, in the Vancouver suburb of Burnaby, where it really is just a bedroom community, they wiped out dozens of 3-story modest walk-up apartments to build luxury towers. And retired people who worked lower-end jobs and so on, lost a place to live.
Well, they've been doing that all over Canada and probably all over North America. It's crazy, right? And so those ground, it's a bit of a land play, because the ground-oriented stuff that's 40 years old or something, there's still lots of them left in Edmonton. The apartments rent for a very, very low amount because they're not in great shape. Nobody's fixed them up, and they're 2 or 3 stories. But the nice thing is, because they were built so long ago, the rooms there's more space. And but the owners, the people that have, there's several groups that are trying to buy them up. They're not buying it for those buildings. Obviously, the buildings are a write-off. It's the land, and because there's a lot of land associated with that, compared to a high-rise where there's almost no land attached to the project. These 40 or 50-year-old ones got lots of land attached to it. So that maybe that's the future, if we can find enough land. There certainly is. There are chunks of land in most cities in Western Canada. Maybe not in Vancouver, but certainly in Calgary and Edmonton, Winnipeg, that where you could recreate that. But there's not the private sector developers are not interested in that. So the government may have to get involved in the government backed out in late 70s, never came back, and it's probably time they have to get involved again.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines. Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. You mentioned perhaps government involvement in getting affordable rentals, perhaps even affordable condos out there. But does the government have any money left after throwing billions around to help people out through the COVID crisis?
You know, it's amazing the amount of money that's, and probably it's going to continue because I think the CERB 2,000 a month lasts till September, but will enough people be back at work making a real income by then? We don't know that yet. So the $120 billion number or whatever the projection, I think I saw that number. There's so many programs, it's hard to keep up. But the federal deficit was going to be something like 20 or 30 billion, and now they're projecting maybe 120 billion. The total debt for Canada at the federal government level, and these are rough numbers, was around 700 billion or something, and was projected to be that much. Now it's going to be another 100 or 200 billion on top of that, and happening very quickly. But because the government of Canada is borrowing the money in its own currency, they can keep doing that for a long time, and especially with interest rates this low. But I know a lot of high-income taxpayers have said to me they're really afraid of the government trying to get that money back from the higher-income people in order to pay it off. But most of these things that happen, the debt never gets paid off. You think about the Second World War. Last time there was a big surge in government debt on this kind of scale. The debt was never really paid off, but it became trivial in the context of the growth in GDP that happened over the subsequent 20 years after the end of the Second World War. So certainly people were worried about it at the time. I think they were very worried about it, but the worry was overdone because GDP growth took care of it. The problem this time, of course, is that we don't know if there's going to be the GDP growth like there was after the baby boom started in 1947, and so that would be the concern. But that's not the biggest concern right now. The biggest concern right now is what to do about all. I mean, these kind of unemployment numbers are even in the Great Depression, probably unemployment didn't get as high as it's going to get in the next 3 or 4 months. And in the 1930s, a lot of the unemployed people had the option of returning to the family farm because there was a tremendous amount of people still living in an agricultural setting, and it's not like their family was going to pay them a wage for going home. There's no way that was going to happen, but at least they could get some food. So that's that option is no longer available to almost everybody. So it's going to be a real challenge. So anything the government can do to think of some big, bold program where they could put some people to work would be helpful. And as long as it made some sense in terms of improving. And some of the biggest projects that came out of the Depression were still benefiting from those public works projects that were done. It took them a few years into the Depression to get organized enough to do it. But once they got rolling, they built dams and highways and all kinds of stuff. And
sure.
We're still benefiting from that.
Yeah, you have the Albert Street Bridge in Regina, the world's longest bridge over the smallest body of water over Wascana Creek, a few feet across, but I think the bridge is something like 1,000 feet.
Yeah. No, there's lots of things that could be done, and
that we need.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some argument about which projects and that sort of thing. And there's always an attempt, because the government is embarrassed about getting involved directly. There's always this attempt to give an incentive to private sector, but that doesn't work a lot of times because the private sector doesn't always have the same incentives or it's the same objectives. But one of the things that's coming out of the COVID-19 crisis is the need, at least in some parts of Canada and the U.S., probably all over the world, for better nursing home and senior home care so that people don't die. Most of the deaths in Canada have been related to people living in nursing homes, and so obviously there's something needs to be done there. So that could be
Well, perhaps we should tell politicians you can't get the job unless you live in a nursing home for a year.
Yeah.
You'd see conditions improve pretty quick, wouldn't you?
They have parents, so I mean, they presumably, if they're young enough to still have parents around, they'll be concerned about it, I think. And of course, there's going to be a lot of empty spots in some of the nursing homes now because people are passing away. But it's not a huge. But I did read in I think United Kingdom, who's got a tremendous problem with people dying from COVID-19, that it has already shortened the life expectancy of the population by 2 years. So it's quite a big impact already. Now, if somebody's 85 and they were projected to live to 87, but they passed away at 85, maybe the 2 years, I mean, to them it's maybe a big deal, and maybe it isn't, but it is interesting how different people put different...
Well, the people who recovered have suffered heart, permanent lung damage. They get blood clots in their legs. Little kids now get a nervous syndrome and with poor circulation in their legs. So the people who survived, a lot of them are going to have a lifetime of medical problems that'll have to be looked after.
Yes, and we're going to learn more about it. That's one of the reasons for. A lot of people are saying to me now, we can't stay locked down forever. We have to get back out. We have to go back to work and stuff. But and it is expensive to keep people inside for another 3 or 4 months. But you think about October 1st or November 1st. We are going to know so much more about. I only heard about COVID toes a couple of days ago. I never heard about COVID toes before, and so there's all kinds of stuff that will be learned over the next 3 or 4 months, and so that's valuable. And now it's costly to keep everybody away from work, but it's also valuable in terms of learning more. But on Friday, we had an announcement in the U.S. of a big run-up in the stock market, 4 or 5%, or maybe it was Monday. And one of the companies, Moderna, indicated they might have a vaccine. So there's a lot of hope being placed on that, at least in the stock market. The algorithms, a lot of the trading in the stock market is done by algorithms now, and the algorithms will be programmed to react to any mention of a vaccine. So unfortunately, that might be just the algorithm reacting. I don't know, but some of the people that have been studying these things for 30, 40 years, one of the most prominent is a woman named Laurie Garrett, who's actually a reporter, and she's written about 3 or 4 books now about epidemics, and the one I'm reading right now is called The Coming Plague by Laurie Garrett, and the part where she talks about the troubles getting a vaccine, it's amazing. Like the vaccines are really hard to some viruses you never get a vaccine. Other ones you get one, but you don't know if it's safe, so you can't give it to a bunch of people. And there's the pharmaceutical companies, for example, don't necessarily want to put out a vaccine because they're not very profitable, and they have horrible liability issues. So if you start giving a vaccine to 7 billion people and 200 million of them die, you got 200 million lawsuits on your hands. So the government has to, and this came up in one of the stories that she told in the book about the swine flu vaccine they tried to do. The company said, we won't do it unless the Congress of the United States gives us indemnity from all liability, because there's just no way we can handle the risk. So this idea of a vaccine for COVID-19, rushing it out, might not work. We're just in the very early days of that. In interviews, Laurie Garrett has said 36 months is the minimum. She thinks it might even be longer to get a working vaccine. But this company on the last couple of days, Moderna is the name of it, the stock ran way up. I think it went up 600%. And they did a trial of 45 people, and 8 of them, I think the number was 8. It was less than 10 for sure. Showed positive response to the antigen. So they developed antibodies So that seems like a sample that's awfully small to take the risk of giving it to a bunch of people. But we'll see what happens.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, are they planning any parade soon for Green Party leader Elizabeth May in Edmonton or Calgary after her statement, oil is dead?
You know, it's hard to imagine that oil is dead. I mean, it's the total demand prior to this was 100 million barrels a day and worldwide, and the problem is that it's dropped to 70 million barrels a day because everybody's inside and people are not traveling, planes are not flying, and so on and so forth. So maybe already the oil demand has rebounded to 80 million barrels a day, but still 20% lower than it was. But the problem, the issue is not that oil is dead, because oil is not going to be dead for a long time, if ever, but it's which oil is dead. So, the competition in North America, there's two big new sources of oil in the last 15 years. The shale oil in Texas, and there's some shale in North Dakota as well, right, the Canadian border. But the shale oil in Texas is big. It's a huge amount. It's like 5 or 6 million new barrels per day. And the Canadian oil, mostly from Alberta, mostly from northern Alberta, mostly oil sands oil. Those are the two big new sources of oil in North America. And so it's kind of a race to see who dies first, if you like. So the disadvantage, the advantage that fracking has is that it gets a lot of oil quickly, and it's a light sweet crude that doesn't need a lot of refining and can be shipped to Asia or wherever. It's closer to tidewater than Alberta oil is. The disadvantage of that kind of oil is it takes a lot of operating costs. You gotta stimulate the well, you gotta frack it, you gotta do all kinds of expensive stuff to get it going, and the decline rate is very high. So you get a big surge of oil in the first year, and then it drops off dramatically. On the other hand, the Alberta oil sands oil, you don't have to do anything; it's just sitting there. You know where it is, and especially for the mining operation, you just scrape off the overburden, and you take the bitumen and you make it into synthetic oil, which is a very high quality oil once it's been converted to synthetic oil. And but the costs in both cases are up in the $30-40 per barrel, which is the rebound now, and the price of oil is back up into that range. So we're right on the cusp of finding out if any of these sources are going to be cut back because of the drop in demand by 20 or 30%. There are parts of the oil sands operation that require steam injection, which may struggle because that also costs quite a bit of money to inject into the ground and then get the oil to bubble out eventually 6 months later. So some people I've talked to have said that the mining operations in northern Alberta will probably survive, but we don't know about the fracking in Texas. And if the election, which is now not that far away, November 3rd or whatever, it's, I don't know how many months, 4 months or something like that, 5 months. If the Democrats win a sweep of the presidency, the House, and the Senate, they may very well say no more fracking. So that would be a huge boost to Alberta oil. And so Elizabeth May's oil is dead. It needs to be more subtly defined which oil dies and which oil survives. That's the bigger question.
And of course, the conversation I started on Twitter, how exactly does she get from Victoria, BC to Ottawa? Does she walk? Does she ride a bike? Does she take a dog sled? Does she ride a horse? What means of transportation does she take from her riding to the capital?
You know, about half of the the consumption in the U.S. I don't know the numbers for Canada, but the U.S. is so much bigger. They consume about 18 million barrels a day, and this is pre-COVID, right? So the numbers will have changed, but pre-COVID, about 18 million barrels a day. About half of that, about 9 million barrels a day, was used for cars like trucks, vehicles, and that sort of thing. Not counting airplanes, not counting locomotives and that sort of thing. So that could diminish by 30%, and you'd still have 7 million barrels a day or 6-point-something million barrels a day of demand for cars and light trucks. I did read something yesterday about the electric bike, though, and that's interesting. If you set aside space for bikes on the roadway, and everybody got an electric bike, you could sure save a lot of fuel. But even that, I don't think would completely kill the demand for crude oil that goes into transportation. It's a big part of the thing. And,
well, it's hard to pack your groceries around on an electric bike. I guess if you bought every day, but
well, yeah, I mean you could nibble. If you're only eating green shoots and vegetables and stuff like that, you could take that home, and you could go to the store 3 times a day in your electric bike, and wouldn't be a problem. But I don't know what you do in the winter, though. That's the only problem. But
well, of course, here in the lower mainland of British Columbia, winter. What's that?
Yeah.
I mean, we get 2 weeks of winter, so you might have to stock up and have your groceries delivered for 2 weeks. But even in the snow, I see people out here in their bicycles. You can't stop them.
Well, yeah, and you could heat the roadway underneath the bike so that the snow would stay away.
Oh, please don't give them that idea, please.
But then you'd have to use petroleum to heat use natural gas to heat the electric would be too expensive. So I don't think we're going to get away from oil anytime soon. But
yeah.
But the fracking in the U.S., it requires like $40 a barrel, plus it requires some very lenient regulatory environment. And the oil has rebounded. It's back up to 30-35, but it's not at 40. So we're going to find out in the next 6 months whether the fracking gets hit really hard here. And now, I didn't mention, but Alberta oil is about 4 million barrels. So of the total, so 4 out of 18 million barrels comes from Canada. I should say not Alberta, Canada. Most of it's from Alberta. And so we, by far, are the biggest. There's nobody else that even does 1 million barrels into the U.S. Most of them are in the 100,000, 200,000. So we have the most to lose if fracking survives, and we have the most to gain if fracking falters. So we'll see what happens.
Hilliard, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Nice to talk to you again.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. His website, macbethgroup.com. If you have any questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.